God's direct marriage and romance licenses. Beauty and romance, God's design, great interest, and gift. Please see www.jubilantwhale.net. Yet religions and life's experiences might have made many people feel otherwise. Marriage a possible prison, or great cause of disgrace? Recently, while advocating that God greatly cares about love, beauty, and romance, as shown in the Sermon of the Whale, www.jubilantwhale.net, some have responded saying that God rather seems to not want them to experience love and romance, and rather seems to be preventing such. Some claim that their lonely life without love and romance does not move God at all. Yet is it actually God preventing love and romance, or is the inhibitor rather possibly faulty religious and social pressures, and faulty concepts about legitimate love and romance? Men, in our day, certainly have reason to fear today's modern marriage plan and license, which allows a contrary woman to divorce and take the husband's property, in a manner as never was thought of in old times in Israel. Although religious, and even non-religious people, certainly make a great ado of marriage, involving mere man's marriage licenses, who in reality defines what instigates or validates a marriage. Certainly the marriage license, and type of marriage license, which God gives is of most importance. I am wondering if religions in general, as well as myself, understand the purport of God's laws regarding marriage, and what marriage must include and may not include. If marriage must be thought of as an ultra-holy, untouchable, and unbreakable chain instigating a quite possible prison, and which if unsuccessful brings a permanent disgrace, rather than thought of as a protective wall and guardrail, certainly such a mindset could cause fear and hinder many people from experiencing love and romance. Thus marriage doing quite opposite of what God intended his marriage plan to instigate and do. Marriage to be a chain and prison, or a protective wall. Those who think of marriage as a chain or possible prison should seriously ponder the fact that in old times God ordained marital separations for mere business reasons, as a woman servant was actually to remain with her master when her husband left their mutual master, after his 7 years of service were fulfilled, Acts 21:16. How often do we hear religious people, who too often lift up marriage as an ordinance higher than the heavens and before whom man is as dirt, speak of this fact. Jesus, speaking of man's significance and God's care for man, said the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath, meaning the Sabbath was made to serve and benefit man rather than vice versa. Likewise marriage was made for man and to serve and bless mankind rather than marriage being created greater than man and as a scourge and chain with which to endlessly bind mankind in impossible relationships. Nevertheless, lifetime marriage relationships certainly are God's foremost and best plan, and obviously and certainly the lifetime plan is the best plan if the marriage encloses loving parents with their children as God intends. Although marital separations in some situations might be the best solution, and in possibly many situations sanctioned of God, nevertheless it must be admitted that the separation solution certainly is not as ideal as solutions restoring and keeping original love vibrant, and families together for life. Marriage in old times, the letter and spirit of the law. Regarding marital relations in old times in Israel, and especially those involving concubines, it does not appear they were such a permanently binding obligation. It is noteworthy that Abraham not only took another wife after Sarah's death, but appears also had numerous concubines, Gen 25-16. When Prophet Hosea took his various companions, as in Hosea chapters 1-3, he told them not to be for any other man during that time. Although we might not understand many things, we certainly can know God's marriage plan is intended to provide a secure and healthy haven for love and romance as well as a secure place for children. Therewith his marriage plan is to prevent careless and unwise separations which will be regretted later. Nevertheless, that does not mean marriage must be an oppressive chain or prison. Our God certainly hates oppression, while therewith following the letter, rather than the spirit of God's marriage laws, can readily bind and imprison and create the very oppression which God hates. A vital document regarding marriage which I felt to write years ago is given at http://www.teachinggod.com/home.htm, as well as available in Kindle format at www.amazon.com. The document clearly shows following the letter of the law can readily do the very opposite of what God intends. Apostle Paul with much reason spoke of the letter of the law killing while the spirit of the law gives life. Regarding these matters as well as all matters, kindness, love, and consideration is of utmost importance, while a positive and mutual agreement of all involved people likely makes a great difference regarding what may constitute a marriage, or what is an acceptable separation, or what God counts as fornication or adultery. One certainly has reason to question what actually defines a marriage, and provides for legitimate love and romance in God's eyes. It certainly is not man's marriage license, but rather God's marriage license. God's marriage license. Unique incident involving a license plate. Thinking of God's marriage license made me think of the following incident which I never shared before. I for over 25 years have been quite religiously shunned by my own dear wife, as she follows her church which has excluded me as I being too inquisitive could not simply fit into their system. Therewith I have been rejected from my own family table, for all these years, according to her church's rules. For many years I did not feel God rigidly bound me to this difficult situation where powerful religious and social pressures were causing me to be quite disdained by my one and only wife. At one particular time, some years ago, God very clearly showed me I was not bound to only having a wife who shunned and disdained me as such. Further, one evening I had the inkling that God might soon confirm the same to me even more. Very interestingly, the next morning when I went out into our garage to go on my routine bakery delivery, I noticed something lying on top of my delivery van. I looked again, and interestingly, a license plate which had been up on our beam in our garage for 4 years had fallen down on top of the van during that very night. The van was out and driven the night before. God had amazingly showed his further marriage license, while his license is what counts. Unique experience and dreams after much pain. Pondering what legitimate marriage and romance might have included in ancient Israel, as well as today, made me think of the below incident which I neither have previously shared. This unique incident occurred in September of 2013. I was away from home on a job with some co-workers, and while in the motel one night I had a horrendous toothache. I not only was in great pain with my tooth, but also at that time was thinking about and very pained about some good things which I thought God had promised to me, and which simply did not seem to ever be coming to pass. In this time of great pain and distress, I was repeatedly telling myself that regardless of all things God was righteous and that I was the faulty one, and therewith was praying God to be merciful to me. I could not sleep because of the pain, and although being awake and in great pain, did not wish to create a disturbance which would hinder the sleep of the other workers in the room. In my distress I committed myself in a new way to be rejected of men for God and truth's sake, whether rejected because of conservative or liberal views. Just before this particular job I had been working on a quite dramatic document. The document I was working on, by focusing on nude religious art, as is often displayed in old Bibles or old cathedral paintings, sought to lessen the shame and disdain which is often placed upon nudity, and therewith also sought to lessen the shame and disdain often placed upon unveiled feminine physique as God created in the beginning and declared very good. For many years before this I had been passionately seeking to reveal that the repulsive feminine veiling traditions, as practiced by Muslims and many Christians, are largely the opposite of God's intent for mankind, with that conclusion being confirmed by numerous miraculous incidents as well as by biblical and historical research. I, while in pain and distress in the motel bathroom, started to carefully ponder the document which I had been working on. While pondering the document I suddenly was very impressed with the thought that men, through seeing and realizing the most splendid beauty of women as without obstacle or blemish, may not only be motivated to esteem women more highly, but might be motivated to desire or need a mate more, even if not having such perfect beauty. In some respects I did not like the thought, as I felt it was not that easy for a man to attain a legitimate companion in God's eyes, and I certainly did not wish the admiration of magnificent feminine display to instigate rapes or any inappropriate relationships. I was very aware that in some countries, when fully unveiled feminine photos were permitted, the number of rapes in that country actually fell, rather than increasing, and likely because men's curiosity and visual desires were significantly satisfied without such dreadful misconduct. As I pondered the document, and therewith my new concern that seeing and realizing extraordinary feminine beauty might cause men to desire or need a companion more, which companion I felt might be hard to attain in a legitimate manner, suddenly the terrible tooth pain completely ceased. The relief was so great it made me weep. What a relief it was! I then, without any pain, went back to my bed and slept, and then had some almost strange yet powerful dreams. In my dream I for some reason suddenly spoke up and declared that God has an exception pertaining to sex outside of rigid marriage, man's rigid concepts of marriage. I myself was shocked at what I said in the dream. After this dream and incident, I certainly was made to think about how the Jews, when King David was old and feeble, sought and brought the most beautiful young woman in the land to David to be as another one of his many wives or concubines. Where were God's heavy marriage chains preventing love and romance in all this? Afterwards I also was made to think of the many wives and concubines men of God freely had in old times, and to think of how Samson related to women without losing the Spirit of God, as well as the many seemingly loose sexual manners of God's people in old times, including polygamy. Certainly it is God, rather than man, who has authority to give marriage, love, and romance licenses. The Bible speaks about erring religions disallowing marriage, and actually speaks of such as the doctrines of devils, which assuredly reveals God gives marriage, love, and romance licenses where men and religions will not. After having stated in my dream that God has an exception pertaining to sex outside of rigid marriage, man's rigid concepts of marriage, as the dream and night then continued, I experienced tremendous peace and tranquility. I in my dream or dreams vividly spoke in tongues, being something I often wished I could do. In my dream I was picked up and floated about in the room in unspeakable rest and power. I think I awoke almost gasping for breath, as what I was experiencing in the dream was so blessed. It certainly was a great change compared to the great pain both physically and emotionally I had been experiencing earlier in the night. Concluding thoughts. Although God in old times as well as today, grants many liberties regarding marriage, beauty, and romance, such nevertheless does not mean same-sex relations, gay lifestyles, are within heaven's disposition, blessing, and healthy romantic boundaries. Same-sex relations certainly are not healthy for the family arrangement, for children, or human health in general. Just ask a blood donor. Certainly all should be kind to those with same-sex attractions, but neither should such be endorsed as good and healthy. Actually, painful sexual oppression and disappointments can stimulate and encourage faulty sexual orientations. God created humanity's romantic desires and emotions, and he certainly is interested in happy marriages, endowed with healthy love, beauty, and romance. Such is clearly shown in the scriptures, while he has shown me and others the same in many miraculous manners. God intends love, beauty, and romance to greatly thrill, encourage, and bless humanity, as well as to be the blissful beginning of all new life. The Bible speaks of God's laws as sweet as the honeycomb and the perfect law of liberty. It classifies God's laws as wonderful, delightful, faithful, and lovely. In conclusion, may God help us understand what marriage might be and not be, and to see marriage as more than a heavy chain and great risk, resulting in too many feeling as though God was preventing them from the blessing of marriage, beauty, love and romance. Please see www.jubilantwhale.net.